Okay, so it's Monday, and I'm going to continue on here with this article, Spurious Spirituality. Spurious Spirituality. Say that 5 times. All right, and this part here is spiritual death, quote unquote. In my earliest efforts to solve the problem of death, which overtook Adam when he sinned, I fell back on the phrase then common among Bible expositors, that is, spiritual death, in contrast to physical death. Later, when I sought to avoid unsound, unscriptural expressions, I was forced to drop these non-scriptural phrases. Then I saw how misleading they were. The effect of Adam's sin was not confined to his spirit and his relationship to God. It vitally affected his physical frame, dying to die. You are dying, and eventually you will die. Christ died, was entombed, and was roused the third day, raised and roused and vivified the third day. But he was dead for 3 days. He became mortal in the active sense of dying. That was Adam. And this he has transmitted to the race, the whole of the human race, which accounts for all disease and sin, as well as alienation from God. Adam and his posterity have been physically dying ever since. It is true that he became figuratively dead to God, yet the figure is not founded on his spirit alone, but upon his future literal death, which included spirit, soul, and body. So the spirit goes back to God who gave it, the breath, the spirit. The soul goes to the unseen or unperceived, and the body to the soil from whence it came. It goes back to the soil. It came out of the soil, so it goes back to the soil. So there's nothing to spiritualize there. It's simple, straight facts. Spirit goes back to God who gave it, the breath, the spirit. The soul, which is your senses, goes to the unperceived, and that's just your senses, the feelings. All of this is your soul. Your soul is your consciousness, your feelings, period. So that's what goes to the unperceived, and the body goes back to the soil. How confusing this manner of speaking may be seen in the death of our Lord. He died physically and was dead for 3 days when he commended his spirit into the hands of his Father. Luke chapter 23, verse 46. And know this, you have to have all three, the spirit, the body, and the soul, all three of them, in order to make up a being. So this is what needs to be raised and vivified. So spirit is basically the rousing and the vivification. It's life, real life. So all three are necessary. So it is with all flesh, for it has no life apart from spirit. Literal death always includes both flesh and spirit, for the flesh returns to the soil when the spirit returns to God. The converse is true also. Death limited to one of man's components is impossible or figurative. Impossible or figurative. See that? Figurative means impossible, but it's a figure. You got to understand what's a figure and what is literal. Figurative and literal. The fact that unbelievers are figuratively dead to God is based on their literal death. And you can see they're basically the walking dead, the masses of unbelievers, including all of Christendom. So they're figuratively dead to God. So you can use that as a figure. The Walking Dead, and it's not a TV program or a TV series. It's literally Walking Dead because they're walking and they're unbelieving. They are simply so oblivious of the deity as if they were literally in the grave. The complementary terms spiritual life and physical death, or spiritual life and physical life, are also non-scriptural and unsound, for they imply that there is life apart from spirit. It is not easy for us to avoid them because we are not accustomed to the language of figures, which is so freely used in the scriptures. Makes it confusing when you mix up figurative and literal in the scriptures. That's what's confusing, and it's the authorized version that spews this out. And it's used constantly. Why do people use the King James Version when they know the truth? It doesn't make sense. They should be going to a more sound and scriptural deal. I know the cross-referencing's there. You can cross-reference if you want. I've done a lot of that over the years between the King James Version and different versions and the Concordant Version. Especially being a new believer, you study. So yeah, it makes sense that people still hold on to the King James, but I don't understand it when you're sound and solid in the truth. Why not use a more consistent and sound version like the Concordant version? Okay. It is necessary for us to break with these misleading expressions. However, for it is practically impossible to grasp the truth as to death and life so long as we harbor them. Okay, here's an authorized version. Genesis 2:17. In the day that thou eatest thereof, thou shalt surely die. And that's the authorized version. In my early studies in the scriptures, this passage caused me much concern. And of course it would. Look how it sounds. In the day thou eatest thereof, thou shalt surely die. For it was very plain that Adam did not die that day. I was forced to accept the only explanation offered me at that time, that the death was spiritual, quote unquote. So as I was told, all of Adam's descendants were also spiritually dead until they pass out of death into life. John 5:24. They are dead in trespasses and sins. Ephesians 2:1 authorized version. See the authorized version? It just perverts. It does, and it just perverts your understanding, confuses you more than anything else. At that time, I knew so little of the function of the Spirit that the manifest absurdity of spiritual death was not apparent to me. But when I learned that life is the product of Spirit and death is due to the lack of Spirit, it dawned upon me that there is no such thing as spiritual death, for death is the most unspiritual thing in the universe. The scriptures never use such an expression. Thank you. Neither should we confuse life with consciousness. An unconscious tree has life. Amazing. We cannot insist that only the spirit of Adam died, for in humanity it is the spirit that imparts and sustains life. The body has no life apart from it. Withdraw the spirit and the whole man is dead. Adam did not die that day. The Hebrew is quite clear if taken literally. In the day you eat from it, to die shall you be dying, and this is the concordant version. That is sound teaching. Adam became mortal that very day, just as all who descended from him undergo the dying process. It does not cease when one believes. Faith does not stop dying. It does not clothe with immortality. So the death that came to Adam and that which characterizes the unbeliever as distinct from the believer cannot be the same and should not be called by the same name. Neither is spiritual. Adam's was literal. The sinner's is figurative. Just as he came out of the darkness into light, so he proceeds out of death into life. The process is a spiritual one because it is wrought by God's Spirit. Both certainly should not be called spiritual when one is due to the absence of spirit. Okay. So we will continue on with spiritual life next go around here. So, grace and peace. Have a beautiful Monday. We will talk to you later.